Thursday, October 1st, 2020. I would ask everyone to bear with me because I'm required to read a rather lengthy opening statement. Good morning and welcome to the October 1st, 2020 Board of Assessors meeting. As Chair of the Board of Assessors, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by the Governor as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, and in accordance with the Governor's Emergency Order number 12, pursuant to Executive Order 20-04, this body is authorized to meet electronically. Excuse me. Please note that there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting, which was authorized pursuant to the Governor's Emergency Order. However, in accordance with the emergency order, I am confirming that we are A, providing public access to the meeting by telephone with additional access possibilities by video or other electronic means. We are utilizing Zoom through the city's IT department for this electronic meeting. All members of the Board of Assessors have the ability to communicate contemporaneously during this meeting through this platform, and the public has access to contemporaneously listen into this meeting through dialing the following number, 929-205-6099. Once again, that number is 929-205-6099, and using the meeting ID number 647-473-0083. And once again, that number is 647-473-0083 and password 229644. And that number once again is 229644. The public may also view the meeting on Comcast channel 16. B, providing notice of the necessary information for accessing the meeting. We previously gave notice to the public of the necessary information for accessing the meeting through public postings. Instructions have also been provided on the City of Nashua's website at nashua.newhampshire.gov and publicly noticed at City Hall in the National Public Library. C, providing a mechanism for the public to alert the public body during the meeting if there are problems with access. If anybody has a problem accessing the meeting via phone or channel 16, please call 603-821-2049. Once again, that number is 603-821-2049, and they will help you connect. D, adjourning the meeting if the public is unable to access the meeting. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting via the methods mentioned above, the meeting will be adjourned and rescheduled. Please note that all votes that are taken during this meeting will be done so by a roll call vote. Let's start the meeting by taking a roll call attendance. When each member states their presence, the reason they are not able to attend the meeting in person, please also state whether there is anyone in the room with you during this meeting, which is required under the right to know law. So I will now call the roll. Mr. Early.
It's Robert Early, member of the Board of Assessors. I'm following the governor's directive and joining the meeting remotely from my home. There is no one home with me.
Mr. Bergeron.
This is Paul Bergeron, a member of the Board of Assessors. Following the governor's advisory, I'm joining the meeting remotely from my home. My 11-month-old granddaughter is in her playpen elsewhere in the room.
I'm Deanne Hansberry, member of the Board of Assessors, and following the governor's advisory, I'm also joining the meeting remotely, and there is no one in the room with me. Please direct all testimony to this board and not to anyone in the audience. If you have questions, they are to be directed to the board, and we will do our best to get them answered. When directing testimony to this board, please announce your name clearly for the record. Ms. Brown, are there any changes to today's agenda?
There are no changes.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions before we begin? Seeing none, is there a motion to waive the reading of the minutes of the Board of Assessors meeting from Thursday, September 17th, accept them and place them on file?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Are there any errors or corrections? Seeing none, all those in favor of accepting the minutes as presented signify by saying yes or no through a roll call vote. Mr. Early?
Yes.
Mr. Bergeron?
Yes.
Mr. Hansberry, yes. Minutes are accepted as presented. Is there a motion to waive the reading of the minutes of the non-public session, which was held during the September 17th, 2020 Board of Assessors meeting, accept them and place them on file?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Are there any errors or corrections? All right, seeing none, I will call the roll. Mr. Early?
Yes.
Bergeron?
Yes.
Mr. Hansberry, yes. Minutes are accepted as presented. At this time, I would like to recognize Director Kimberly Kleiner, who's the Administrative Services Director, and part of her responsibility is oversight of the assessing department. Director Kleiner?
Good morning, everyone. I'll make this relatively brief this morning. We have another guest with us, but I will share my screen with my update. So building modifications have begun. It's a little noisy out here on the first floor and on the garden level. There's an update that's included in the attached Assessing Monthly Monitor newsletter, which is going out today, and as usual will be posted on the website. As you all know, the assessing department received an extension on our annual MS1 from the New Hampshire Department of Revenue Administration. The report's due later today, so staff is working very hard. I will provide a year-over-year comparison to the board by the end of the week. It should be probably pretty late in the day today before we get that sent over electronically to the DRA. The MS1 report required all of our land use codes to be mapped, and in our new CAMA system, that was not done for us to the New Hampshire MS1. So we had a team of developers at Patriot Properties, our own IT department, and the assessing staff. It was very challenging, and I want to thank everyone for their time, their dedication, contributions that they made to putting together that report. Our residential assessors, Mr. Mandeel and Mr. Gary Turgis, have concentrated on closing building permits and updates to property record cards in preparation for the annual MS1 and of course the final tax bill in December. We'd like to thank the residents who have answered our new building permit questionnaires, which was put in place, as the board knows, in lieu of interior inspections. And those that participated in an interview with our assessors. In the past 45 days, over 485 building permits have been closed and captured. On October 4th, our second quarterly update on the full measure and list revaluation is due to the New Hampshire Board of Tax and Land Appeals. I did confirm with legal this morning that report was filed. We'll provide a electronic copy to you. As always, it will be posted on the city website. If you prefer a printed copy, please let us know. Today, we welcome George Sansucci to the Board of Assessors meeting. Mr. Sansucci's report on the City of Nashla's 2020 utility assessments was included with your meeting materials. Mr. Sansucci is available to answer any questions regarding changes in assessments due to the recently passed House Bill 700, which changed the methodology for valuation of utility distribution property for water, gas, and electric companies. So I will introduce Mr. Sansucci.
Thank you, Kimberly.
Good morning, Mr. Sansucci. How are you?
Good morning, Mr. Hansberry.
And the other board members joining me are Bob Early and Paul Bergeron. Are you coming to us from the Great North Woods?
I am, Lancaster, New Hampshire.
So this gives new meaning to us meeting remotely.
I know, it's wonderful, isn't it? Think of all the money everyone say we don't have to travel.
How are things with the Grand Mountain View?
The Mountain View is doing very well. Of course, they've been hit very hard because they focused on weddings and conventions, but they are doing fine in that arena. They built a new building, so it's going good there. It's going good at the Omni at Mount Washington. The two of them are doing very well.
Terrific. I have one story I want to share with you about the Grand Mountain View, then we'll get down to business. It was at a wedding there a number of years ago. In fact, it was Columbus Day weekend. And my brother was talking to a gentleman in the parking lot. And I can't remember if he had a Bentley or a Rolls Royce. And he complimented the gentleman on the car, and the gentleman thanked him. And come to find out, the person he was talking to was Mitt Romney. I guess you never know who you're going to run into up in Lancaster, New Hampshire.
Oh, you'd be surprised. It used to be the Kennedy family. Now it's the likes of other politicians, but you never do, and they come from all over the world. Not this year, but they do. We have a Rolls, an old Rolls in Lancaster. That's a local family that digs it out in the summer, and they go up and eat up there. So I was going to wait and see what you said and see what color is. I'll tell you who it was. We have the chairman of Marriott Corporation hiding in the woods up here,
Wow.
believe it or not, about 2 miles from my house.
The floor is yours. Did you have an executive summary that you might want to provide us?
Sure, I do. This is a transition year into House Bill 700. House Bill 700 came out of the second to the last major case where public service sued 49 towns, the co-op sued 17, and we won that 100%. They put 3 bills in the legislature over 3 years to codify book value or the DRA value of assessment in the state, and all 3 of those bills were killed. They were all masked and disguised. The outcome, this is just a little bit of a side, so it helps you understand the context. The state of New Hampshire DRA testified against the towns and cities and testified in behalf of the utilities that the net book value was the appropriate value. And using their method, the DRA's method. The state actually ruled, the BTLA ruled that they were dead wrong, and anyone using the state's values were probably valuing it illegally for a variety of reasons. And that led to what we now know of as a change in personnel at the BTLA. The final bill that was introduced in the legislature by the Sununu group, or the public service group, they're all together in this, was a study commission, which we'd always said, let's get together, get everybody in a room and thrash this out and stop the litigation. The study commission was developed and formed. We were there at every moment, and we provided all of the information the commission considered. The utilities refused to provide information to the study commission, angering the legislature because they said it was confidential, which absolutely was not true. And for our communities, we achieved 87.5% of value, fair market value, for the coming out of the House Bill 700, compared to what would have been a reduction of 60% of the value going down to book value, and that's what you have today. It is a statistical methodology, so we had to change things around in Nashua. The key element is that the utilities got a 5-year glide path in that law, so that if they were using the state's value, which was so much lower, the public service did not want a tax rate shock, nor did the PUC the first year that had to go into rates. So they put in a 5-year 20% glide path. So you couldn't bleed in the increases any more than 20% a year. But if you were on our original rates or our values, our 70 communities or 80, whatever it was at the time, then there would be no rate shock because you were starting at the higher rate. So they required all the towns and cities to measure the increase against 2018. So if we so our towns who had values for 2018 started at basically 100% of value. Mr. Bolton, your attorney, engaged us in 2018 without knowing the outcome of House Bill 700, but it was very prescient on his part to get in and do the values as part of the overhaul of the assessing side. And that led to a situation where you in Nashua we're able to basically come in at full value. Even though you have a glide path, so to speak, you basically started at a much higher value. So your glide path is moot. So these values that you have in front of you are basically full value based on 700 because they are what we did in 2018, and 2018 was the trigger year. Now, clearly, we were there representing our communities and influenced this as much as we could. So we're very pleased under the circumstances of what's come out of it and what we were able to do for the city and our other communities. And it's evidenced by the fact that I think you're going up, Kim, what, 40 million round numbers for your utilities. This is a statistical methodology. It's designed to stop, by the state, it's designed to stop the litigation. Steve can comment, but I'll put it in layman's terms, is the utilities cannot appeal the value and the methodology of the value, because that's law. They would have to change the law. They can appeal our use of the arithmetic. They have to provide, they have a new mandatory reporting form, and they have to provide that, and we have to do the arithmetic. We have to manipulate the numbers in accordance with the law. We have to vet them. There's always things that we have to double check, and there's errors in this stuff. They can appeal our arithmetic and to make sure we get it right, but not the value that comes out of it. Now, one interesting note here is that when the day that Liberty Utilities bought Energy North, they stopped reporting to the towns and cities, and they never reported since. No matter what was said, they said, we are legally not required. We only have to report to the DRA. The DRA said, we can't give you that information because it's a tax return. So all the towns and cities, including Nashville, lost their eyes and ears on what was going into the ground. Our records, historic records of Nashville, enabled us to be able to estimate what was being built annually and what the value was for Nashville as we were in Hudson and elsewhere. So we had the ability to value the company, but we value them conservatively. You now have a new complete reporting of all dollars spent in Nashville this year in 2020, which is the first time since, I think, 2010 or 2011, since Energy North was purchased by Liberty. And that was something we were insistent that we were able to get in the law because they just flat out refused to report. So the three primary values that matter to you are, of course, Liberty Utilities, which is at 129,188,500 as a group. Even the use of the public right-of-way is built into that under the law. So that's your net assessed number for the year based on an 88.8% equalization rate. The total value of the property is 140.9 million, and then it's equalized out. For public service, the total value of the property is 135 million plus the land. You have a lot of land and land rights owned by public service. Equalized out, it's 133,971,000. And for Liberty Utilities, I'm sorry, for Pennachuck, you have a total combined value of approximately 140 million, but equalized out, it's 131,211,900. For a grand total of 394,372,300 equalized. 10% of that unequalized would be about 440 million grand total value for the town, city, or about 4.4% of your total grand list. Your report from us has every tax parcel that's included within the law. And it also had the methodology with which to fill in the new MS1 form that's new this year for utilities. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. I'd be happy to entertain any questions.
Are there any questions for Mr. Sansucci?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Early?
could Mr. Sansucci go over that 87.5% versus 100% number? I kind of missed what.
Yes. The equalization rate for this year that's being used, because you're outside of a revaluation year, is 88.8%. And the calculation of value is done at 100% full value for the year because it includes all additions. The 2018 glide path start value in the law did not include new additions in all of calendar 18 and all of calendar 19 that were put in the city by the utilities. Those additions were brought in at full value 100% and added to the 2018 value. And then the entire group was revalued for 2020 under the law. Once it's revalued under the law and the rules, then you equalize it down to the equalization rate for the year, and that's the 88.8%.
Right. And so some towns and cities had a much lower number before. Now they're kind of in sticker shock. That's why they get the 5-year phase in. Is that true?
Yes, the poster child in that is Manchester. Manchester has
Very
always
good.
used the state's value. The state's value is 40% of fair market value to 50% of fair market value. Had they gone directly into House Bill 700, where House Bill 700, what we, the towns and cities, achieved was 87.5% of fair market value at the end of the day.
Okay, that's what I had heard before. Okay.
Yeah, and so that then Manchester would come in at $200-300 million worth of new property that for value, and at their tax rate, that would create an immediate rate increase to public service. So the state phased in all those towns that had been using the state's values. So those communities have to go through the 5-year phase in. And that does constitute, we represent about 1/3 of the communities in the state. So that does constitute a good portion of the remaining 2/3 that are in the glide path. You are in the glide path, but from an arithmetic perspective, it has virtually no impact on you because you are at full value.
Okay.
You say,
Thank you.
thank you.
Bergeron, any questions?
No, I don't have any. Thank you.
Attorney Bolton, was there anything that you'd like to add?
I think Skip did a very good job of explaining the situation. We should be much better off going forward, mostly with PSNH, but to the extent other utilities might want to someday appeal, as was explained. Now it's basically appealing whether the formula was applied right, not a whole argument about what's the correct formula to use and who would be a likely purchaser of utility assets, and would they only pay book value, or would they offer a premium, and why would they offer a premium? You may recall last year we spent 11 or 12 days in November and December trying our years 2014, 2015, and 2016 valuation of whatever they call it now, Eversource Energy assets in Nashua. Skip was our expert in that case, along with a lot of the other communities in the state that he and his firm represent. And not all cities and towns did as well as we did, but we had 100% victory in that case. So I think it clearly demonstrates that Skip is doing a good job for us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Any questions for Attorney Bolton?
No?
Well, Mr. Sansucci, thank you very much. Is there anything else that you wanted to add?
Only that thank you very much, and it's a pleasure representing you again as we did in the 90s, and I look forward to continuing to work with you. and
Thank you. It was a pleasure meeting you.
Attorney
Bolton
and Ms. Kleiner. Thank you very much, and I'll sign off.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a motion to waive the reading and place on file a communication submitted to the Board of Assessors by a member of the public?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any discussion? I will call the roll. Mr. Early,
Yes.
Mr. Bergeron,
Yes.
Hansberry, yes. There's no new business. There's no unfinished business. Are there people who are waiting to comment publicly?
Laura Cahoon.
Are there, Director Kleiner?
Hi.
Just a second, please. How many people do we have waiting? Do you know, Director Kleiner?
I believe you have two.
Two, okay. I just want to state the following. I would just remind everybody that although we're meeting in cyberspace, that it is a formal meeting, and the standards that apply to any formal meeting apply to this meeting, just as though we were meeting in City Hall. And there's a certain decorum that's expected. And I would ask that when members of the public, if they do refer to staff members or to members of the board, the members of the board should be referred to as Mr. Early, Mr. Bergeron, Mr. Hansberry. Members of the staff, depending upon who you're referring to, would be addressed as Attorney Bolton, Director Kleiner, Mr. Turgis, Ms. Brown, and so on. And I would ask everybody to adhere to that standard of behavior. And with that, I'll recognize the first person who's up to speak. And if you could state your name and address, please, for the record.
Laura Cahoon at 30 Greenwood Drive.
Good morning.
Good morning. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
You can go right ahead, Mrs. Cahoon.
Okay, I realize that I'm calling because I have still not gotten an answer from anybody in the city and or the state as to when the sales are going to be put on the website and when our assessors are going to actually qualify and MSL review the sales that have been taken for the last year and a half. This is a priority because a lot of the residents use this information, especially on the website, when they want to put their homes up. And I cannot seem to get an answer from anybody as far as when this is going to happen and when they're going to qualify / MSL review the properties. Now, I've written to the mayor several times, Mr. Dontis, Mayor Dontis, and other officials, and I would like the Board of Assessors to tell me when this is going to happen.
Do you have
Did you hear my
question? I would just remind you, Mrs. Cahoon, it's a comment period. It's a public comment period. It's not a question and comment period. It's a comment period. So we're making note of what you're saying.
I think this is a very important question for the residents of Nashua, and nobody seems to be addressing it. And therefore, it has to be asked. You know, this is going on over a year and a half. This is just not acceptable. You're leaving the residents totally in the dark, and obviously you have some sort of a requirement over the Board of over the assessing department. Now, if I can't come here and find out, does the Board of Assessors, can they direct me as to who I can address this problem to and get an answer?
We can have someone get back to you, Mrs. Cahoon.
Okay, can you assure me that somebody will get back to me?
Director Kleiner?
Yes, Chair. I would like to note there was an email sent. It's dated September 14th, 2020. It was sent to everyone that was copied on the original email. It did explain about the sales and about the process, and it was of some length. And I would suggest the public looks at that email.
Thank you.
I'd like to address Ms. Kleiner then, because there was 4 questions at the bottom of my email to everybody, and those were not answered. Out of 306 properties that sold, 4 were qualified or so-called qualified that were completely done, which I would like somebody to explain to me, because you can't have a property that sells for $400 and something thousand and KRT assessed it at 308, and then our assessors reassess it for $300,000. So, you know, as much as I appreciated Mr. Norman answering some of my questions, nobody directed any answers to the 4 properties that I brought the attention to. And those are the answers that I want. And I also want to know, and I want the city to come out and say why the sales are not put on the website. Are they trying to hide something? And why aren't they qualifying / MSS reviewing these properties? This is one of the only ways that the city can actually increase an assessment. So the only people that are really being hurt are the Nashua residents. Did you hear me, Ms. Kleiner?
Yes,
Yes,
we hear
I
you,
did.
Mrs. Cocahoon. You have 1 more minute. It's a 5-minute public comment period, so you have 1 more minute.
I'm here. I'm listening. You give me an answer on this.
The sales are in a new dashboard that are on the front of the assessing website. So there was a new dashboard that was created for the sales while our GIS team works on with CDM Smith, and that was all included in the email.
Well, I did not see that in the email. I will double check. But I still would like the 4 questions I specifically asked about to be answered, either email or something, and I would appreciate somebody getting back to me.
Thank you very
And
much.
the first is 2 Topsfield Drive.
All right, thank you very much, Mrs. Cocahoon.
Thank you.
Who's next, Director Kleiner? Do you?
Lori Ortolano, 41 Berkeley Street.
Good morning. Go right ahead.
Good morning. You know, I'm glad that we understand that we can search those on the dashboard. I spent a little time working on the dashboard, and I wasn't exactly certain of the layout. Would be nice to have a little tutorial on that, but I'm going to pursue some communications with the gentleman who set it up to see if I can get a handle on how it's used. I'm glad the sales are there because I'm starting to help some folks with abatements for next year, and I'm going to need to access that sales data. Tax bills are going to be frozen. I sent you a letter, a correspondence regarding the handling of my 2019 abatement of some concerns I had. I've highlighted to you that in a March 2016 Board of Assessors meeting, Corporate Counsel Steve Bolton introduced himself and let you know that he works for you. And, you know, I've had an impression since I've been involved with assessing and board meetings that you work for him and that he acts more like the chair and the chief assessor. That's a little bit concerning to me. RSA 76:16 by a selectman or assessor states that selectmen or assessors for good cause shown may abate any tax, including prior year's tax, assessed by them or by their predecessor. And then it says, number 2, upon receipt of an application under paragraph 1B, the selectmen or assessors shall review the application and shall grant for good cause shown or deny the application in writing by July 1 after notice of the tax date of RSA 76:1-A. The failure to respond shall constitute denial. I'd like to know if the board is willing for 2020 tax abatements that are coming in to actually review applications. Can anyone answer that question? Because it's part of the RSA, and I know your failure to review my application last year had an impact on fairness on how that was addressed. And I know you told Ms. Calhoun that it's a comment period, but nothing excludes you from answering questions. And you open your meeting with questions will be answered. I was at a Board of Aldermen meeting last week online, when the board engaged extensively with a community member who had questions. So I would like an answer as to whether you are going to review abatement applications and follow the law under 76:16. I understand that the law allows you to fail to respond, but I'm trying to understand if you even knew about my abatement to fail to respond it. As I understand it, the assessing supervisor is responsible for distributing the abatements to the assessors. At some point, the assessing supervisor decided that he was going to pull mine out and not act on it. How does the board find out this is happening? Can the supervisor just hold it off on the side without the board's knowledge? How can the public find out what abatements the Board of Assessors chose to fail to respond on? I want to know if I was the only residential abatement that received this treatment. I've asked Louise Brown for help on this, but I would think the board would be interested in the answer. It doesn't seem correct that the legal office can just order it to be pulled out and ignore it without the board knowing, because the RSA puts the failure to respond on the shoulders of the selectmen or the assessors. When did the board decide not to act on my abatement, and why wasn't it part of the public record? I think the decision to let it expire because you accept the advice of legal to do so should have been on public record. I think the failure to act should be noted in the minutes. I called 3 well-respected chiefs last week and 1 member of the Assessing Standards Board. I spoke to Dan Langill out of Keene, I spoke to Dave Michaud out of Hudson, and I spoke to Bob Gagney out of Manchester, who's also the vice chair of the Assessing Standards Board. Frankly, they were surprised that the board would not have acted on it. One chief stated that he never fails to respond to an abatement. He always acts on them. That was Keene. Another chief said he generally responds to all of them as well, but stated in a few instances, commercial properties with tax representatives may not have received a letter, but he was in communication directly with them and it wasn't a problem. The other chief stated that he acts on all abatements that do not have a tax representative. That was Bob Gagney. He noted that all residential properties get a response and some commercial properties with tax representatives don't get letters as well, but his office is generally in communication with them. He referred specifically to CPTM. 2 of the chiefs stated that the BTLA frowns upon bad faith efforts to work with taxpayers to resolve the issue. I'm disappointed that Rex Norman didn't even look at my 2019 abatement when he approved a massive correction to 39 Berkeley Street and 78 Concord Street. I paid good money to put an appraisal in with my 2019 abatement, and it still wasn't worthy of a decision. When I spoke to one of the chiefs today, or last week, he stated that if the city tells you prior to July 1 that they're not going to act on your abatement, then you're free to file with the BTLA immediately. This would give me an opportunity to get into the system earlier. And speaking with the chief, he made it clear that the BTLA treats every abatement as a new entity. When I explained that Attorney Bolton believed that an appeal and subsequent abatement are inextricably linked, he said that was not the case. He assured me that the BTLA would act on it as a separate entity. And that is what I saw on BTLA online ruling. I think there's an opportunity here to create some guidelines that better service the public and recognize that the courts are overburdened and want municipalities to engage in good faith efforts to resolve the matter. I think that the board should agree from this point forward to act on all abatements filed without tax representatives and act on all residential abatements. I believe the board should also review all abatement applications to be sure they're being treated fairly. Be sure that property owners receive a letter from the city with approval or denial explaining each step. Make sure that the abatements are expiring without board action are clearly identified in an abatement report. Never deny a citizen placement on an agenda regarding their abatement. I looked back over my emails and didn't realize that I tried 4 times to get on the agenda to address my 2019 abatement and did not get placement.
Mrs. Ortolano.
Turns out I'm almost done. I just realized that those requests were being sent right up to legal and being logged by Manuela, and legal wasn't even responding. So they knew I was trying to address this abatement. I truly got the runaround by Attorney Bolton and Ms. Kleiner, and I just don't think it's equitable. And I'm waiting still to figure out the abatement report that Ms. Kleiner sent me showed that my abatement was with a consultant labeled Q. And on the side, it had a note,
Ms.
assessor
Bortolano?
reviewing.
Mrs. Ortolano, we've let you go way, way over. The one thing I would
So
say is,
don't you think this is an important issue, Dan?
uh,
Don't you think making certain people's properties are treated fairly is important?
but I think that.
I know the answer to this, you don't. And the reason there's a police investigation into your actions as a board is because you don't take it seriously, and I do.
I think that Mrs. Ortolano's question was answered by Attorney Bolton explaining how the subsequent abatement application is linked to the prior abatement application. Is there
It was not.
Okay, is there anyone else waiting to comment? All right. Any comments by board members?
No,
No, I have none.
Okay. Is there a motion to go into non-public session under 91A:3 Roman numeral 2 parenthetical I for the consideration of legal advice provided by legal counsel either in writing or orally to one or more members of the public body, even where legal counsel is not present?
so moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
I will call the roll. Mr. Early,
Yes.
Mr. Bergeron,
Yes.
Mr. Hansberry, yes. Let the record show that we have entered non-public session at 9:41 a.m.